Hello. I got this candy in my mouth. I put in about 4 minutes ago. I thought the run rate on the candy would be up. How's that? That better? It's going to fall down now, but how's that? I can stand over here. Weren't you bending down to talk on the mic? No. All right. I was saying that I put this candy in my mouth about 4 minutes ago, and I was sure the run rate on it would be about 4 minutes, and I'm stuck in this position where I've got this candy in my mouth, and you're all here, so I think I'm going to take it out now. So, there we go. It's out now. It's wet. I'm going to put it in my pocket. So, I remember as a kid going to New York City, and I went to the jewelry district, and I don't know, I hope that some of you have been at least to New York City, to the jewelry district. And in the jewelry district, what's interesting about the jewelry district is actually nothing. There's nothing interesting about the jewelry district except for the fact that people choose to go into the jewelry business, because it's very difficult to distinguish the difference between one business and another. They're all next to each other. They all have the same rings and bracelets and watches in the window. And I would often walk by them and think to myself, who wakes up in the morning and says to themselves, I really want to be in the jewelry business and be next to the guy over there with a bunch of rings and bracelets in the window like them? You know, how do you know? Do you know that that's a good business because he must be making money, so therefore I will? Or are you just excited about it? And so I made the clear conclusion that everyone in the jewelry district must have had a father that was in the jewelry business, and it's a business full of people that had parents that were in the business. Because it was hard for me to understand. To me, the most elementary thing was to have a reason for being, to have a good idea. And I thought it was hard in that business to have a good idea. I've since seen people have good ideas in the jewelry business, so now I understand some people from out of the family generational pass down of businesses must have entered that business because they must have come in with something called a lack of educated incapacity. What educated incapacity basically is it's being so well educated about something that you fail to see the opportunity within it. The example that people give is if you're the Gap and you know in all instances that the products that you display need to read from, if you're facing me, you're looking at my left hand, right? From left to right, right? When you read from left to right, is that right? And when you read from top to bottom. Right? So if I was in the business of putting jeans out and I worked for the Gap and I knew that I needed to put my jeans in numerical order running down, then I would effectively put my size 30 jeans here and then my 32s, followed by my 34s, 36s, 38s, 40s, and 42s, so that the biggest, largest guy in the store would have to reach down to pick up those jeans, right? And that's what educated incapacity is. It's not even seeing it because you're in it so deep. It'd be the example of, well, the only people they say that don't have educated incapacity are infants and aliens. So we're all victims of having been taught something. So, you know, part of you know, not being susceptible to that is overcoming or unlearning or coming in with fresh eyes. And those fresh eyes should be the thing ultimately that'll give all of us the reason for being. To cut back to what I really wanted to say, which was that I started out with a landscaping company, so I feel very kin to a lot of you guys here, and congratulations to all of you guys for clearly a great job. That's to the guys that aren't landscapers also. $1 million is a lot of money. So congratulations. And juggling school and juggling college isn't easy. I failed at the college. I was and at the work in college, and I did much better at the work. The opportunity to speak here is particularly important to me because it comes on the night that my mother was able to graduate from the graduate school here in corporate communications, which is exciting for me and an honor to be able to speak at the same time that she has the opportunity to finish Fairleigh. mother uses the corporate communications to tell me what I do wrong every day in corporate communicating. And so here's the story. Without getting into how or why, I gave a young man named Marc Ecko $55,000 in 1993, other people's money, to begin a t-shirt company. And you know what I realized? I'm talking too slow. I have 25 minutes left, so if I talk too fast, please tell me that I am. But based on the time frame that I've been allotted, we have to cover 48 days per minute. And I'm prepared to do that if you're prepared to go for the ride. Okay, so Marc Ecko, he's 20 years old. I give him $55,000. He makes 5,000 shirts. He sells them for $10 a piece, and we lose our first $5,000. I realized that he needed help. I became his partner, and we spent the next 6 years, through 1999, losing $6 million. Had he had a better partner, he probably would be doing better right now. So here's the story. There's two stories to tell, actually. There's a marketing story, which probably would serve you better. And then there's the story of what really happened, which is kind of interesting. I want to try to juggle them both. I'm going to try to juggle them both so that you have the opportunity to get from something from each. And the timelines might meld. They seem to have melded for me. It's all one thing. But here we go. So the first thing that happened, to go back to the marketing story, was we identified a customer that wasn't previously identified. In 1993, my partner Marc was in public school. He was a white Jewish kid living in Lakewood, New Jersey, listening to hip-hop music. He didn't know other white Jewish kids in Lakewood that listened to hip-hop music. His inspirations were graffiti, they were sports, they were hip-hop, and he said there must be other kids like me. My background was that I was Orthodox Jewish in Lakewood, didn't know Marc, didn't go to public school, and didn't listen to hip-hop, but I did like action sports very much, and we met, and we decided that there must be a market or an opportunity to, I might be giving a lot more credit to this whole thing. We might have just done something and then realized what it was afterwards, defined it for speeches, which is probably what's happening right now. But one day you'll have to give a speech and you'll work backwards in your history, you'll make sense of it all, and when you do, it'll probably sound really impressive. What ended up happening was we made these clothes that basically a white kid could wear, a black kid could wear, a white kid that liked black clothing or black kids could wear, black kids that liked white people could wear. We didn't start off by saying you had to be black or white. We just made good clothes. And all the black stores said, you can't be serious, that's way too white. And all the skate stores said, that's way too black, and nobody wanted to buy it. So we thought we had a customer identified, but we didn't have a retailer that wanted it. So what we did was we gave all the goods away on consignment. Now, I don't know if you guys know what consignment is. Consignment is the lowest form of commerce in this country. It's like begging. It's saying, please take my stuff. It's so bad I can't sell it to you. So we gave the stuff away. And most instances, surprisingly, it sold, and people paid us because they wanted more, which was good. Some people didn't want more, and they didn't pay us. That was bad. But for the most part, we did get paid, and we got paid well because they wanted a lot more. And what we found was we had identified a previously unidentified opportunity, which was what we called at the time crossover, which we now call convergence, which is the opposite of crossover, but makes more sense today. So we identified this crossover customer. We started selling t-shirts to both the hip-hop stores and the skate stores. We sold a lot of t-shirts, and then one day Marc came to me and said, Seth, we can't be a novelty t-shirt company. We really need to make clothes. And that was the worst day of my life. Not because I didn't know it then, but remember, I have hindsight now. I'm telling you the story in retrospect, and at the time it was my worst day. I didn't know it. Marc wanted to make clothes. Now, if you're from Lakewood, New Jersey, your father was an attorney who died when you were 16 years old. Your partner's parents were real estate agents that always sold houses in the Lakewood, New Jersey area. Making clothing would be a fairly daunting task. I'm not sure how many of you would know how to go about doing it. I heard that they made jeans in California, and I went there, and I opened up the Yellow Pages, and I found the jean maker, and I gave him a 50% deposit, and I waited and waited and waited a long, long time. Much longer than I expected to wait to get those jeans, about 2 months later. But you know what happens when someone's 2 months late, but they have 50% of your money, and they're ready to ship you? You'd pay them 100% of what's left. and say thank you. And that's what we did. And we got the jeans, but we shipped them real quick because we didn't have time to inspect them, because we had to get them out to the customers, because the customers were waiting for the jeans because we were 2 months late. So we shipped them out to the customers, and we found that immediately we were getting calls from everyone in New York, because that's the first people that got the goods, because UPS delivers one day overnight from New Jersey. And when we got those goods, we found out that all the buttons popped off immediately upon trying to put them on. So all these buttons are popping off everywhere. We're recalling the jeans. We're not shipping what we didn't ship, and we realized that we had a problem. I couldn't send the jeans back to the guy in California because he clearly wasn't honest. And so we looked in the Thomas Register, which I found out about the day before, which was the register of all the companies that exist in the entire United States that do things. And this company that did things was a rivet company that fastened rivets, and they were in Tennessee. And I couldn't figure out how to put rivets on jeans by myself in New Jersey. I had to send these jeans to Tennessee to make the rivets stay on, and I did. And 2 weeks later, it was supposed to be returned to me 2 days after they received it. 2 weeks later, I'm on a plane to Tennessee where everyone's honest, and I found a man and his wife in their garage, slowly, manually, putting the rivets on jeans. Well, the rivets went on the jeans, and if I talk too long, anybody could walk out at any time for any reason, and I won't be upset unless all of you walk out at the same time. I put the rivets back on the jeans and with them, and I flew back waiting for the jeans to come 2 days later, which I did, shipped them out to the customers wanted them, everything was good. And we started a clothing business. We realized we couldn't make jeans in California. We started to try to find other places to make jeans and sweatshirts and other things. It wasn't very easy. We realized that we had customers that wanted the product. We didn't know how to make it. What we realized right away was the number one lesson that I could teach you. Probably the second best lesson I could teach you. The first best lesson that I could teach you is have a purpose for being, exist for a reason, have an identified opportunity that no one else has identified, and approach it with an approach that's unique and entrepreneurial and opportunistic, and people will reward you for the effort if you're right. The second lesson that I could teach you is a great idea does not a business make. And having that idea means absolutely nothing if you don't know how to execute it. And executing it in many instances means a lot of things that you don't identify until you're knee deep in the shit, excuse me, and you have to figure it out. Now we have a history of meeting people that have had success that they found without a great deal of adversity. And we're very different. My partner and I, we've had the good fortune because after you live through it, you really appreciate it, of walking through a field of manure and stepping in every single clump that existed in that field. What that does is it teaches you a great deal, and it also makes you appreciate the fact that your shit stinks too. So when things go good, you don't get it into your head thinking that you could do it 100 more times and forget where you came from. So here's the real story. We make these jeans for a little while, everything's good, and we decide that we need to do more. And my partner meets these gentlemen from Taiwan that say that they have the greatest opportunity in the world for us, which is that they will make all of our clothing, they will finance all of our clothing, and they will import all of our clothing. We will design, market, and sell and ship all of our clothing, right? So we're basically going to be the front end of the house, they'll be the back end of the house. Makes sense, right? We don't know how to do the back end. It's made in places that we've never been in our lives and overseas, and we know the front end very well because we're entrepreneurial marketeers. So what we do is we spend all of our money marketing. We hire tons of celebrities to be in our advertisements, and we market the heck out of the line, and we have all these customers that have bought t-shirts that now want to buy clothing, and things are very, very exciting. And in fall of 1996, we go to a trade show, which, by the way, when we started this company, we didn't even know what a trade show was. We didn't know where they were. We were trying to find them. I remember our first trade show, just to give you an understanding, we'd never been to a trade show before. And if you don't know what a trade show is, it's a gathering of people in the same industry as you that sell products to retailers that don't really know what will happen but know what has happened, buy it until they realize it's not happening anymore. At that trade show, we walked in and found this mega booth from a brand that most of you probably know called Oakley. And as we walked in, Oakley's booth was ominous. It was gigantic. It had smoke coming out of it. And we were there with our 6 t-shirts with no booth. And Marc says, let's turn around and go home. And I said, well, if we wait till everyone's done loading in, their pallets will be available, and we could nail their pallets together, which is what carries their cargo containers in and out. And if we nail those together, that'll serve as a booth, and then we can hang our t-shirts from there, and then we'll have a booth, which is what we did, and it worked. We saw 17 customers that show over 3 days, and I wondered why I didn't go into investment banking and graduate. So we ended up starting this company and being in a position where we found these people that could make products for us, which was wonderful because we didn't know how, and we spent all our money going to market the product, which we did, and people were very excited, which they were, and we went to the trade show, and we found that in fall of 1996, if we go with the right product and the right marketing at the right time of year, in the right trade show, with the right mindset, and a crossover customer that nobody's ever identified, that you could write $4 million, $4.3 million of orders in 3.5 days, which is what we did. So we have $4.3 million of orders, 2 years into business, in 1 day, or 3 days, one trade show, and we hand over the entire $4.3 million in orders to the gentlemen that are going to make it. Now, this is the way the deal worked. When the gentlemen that were going to make the goods landed the goods, we would ship them out, and when we received the payment, the first 50%, which is what the goods cost, 50% of the total sale. So the cost of goods sold was 50%. So on a $10 sale, $5 went to the cost of goods sold, and the other $5 would be the profit. The profit would be split 60% ours, 40% theirs, which means of the remaining $5, we would receive 3, and they would receive 2. And that would be the profit split. So this was a wonderful relationship until it started, and we gave them the $4.3 million of orders, and what happened was in spring of 1997, when they were supposed to deliver the goods, February, the goods still weren't in. Now we had this problem. We were going back to the trade show. We had promised everyone we would ship them in January. It was now February, the end of February, and we had to go to a trade show. And they had to believe in us enough to place orders again because we were sure we were going to eventually get the goods, and when we'd ship them, we'd need orders for the next season. So you know what we did? We built a bigger trade show booth. And it was crowded like before, and people must just assume that they must not have gotten their allocation of the good stuff we were doing. And we took $7.3 million in orders. The only problem was the 4.3 never came. What did come was 2.1. Of the 2.1, 1.1 was shippable. The other $1 million of products was made in the deepest, darkest, worst factories in all of China. And when you put your books in the book bags, the bottom of the book bags would stay on the floor and the tops would come up, and there were oil stains from faulty sewing machines that splattered all over the knits that we made, and we couldn't ship about $1 million worth of goods. In addition to that, a lot of boxes that were marked 36 really only had 24 inside of them. When we got the 1.1 that was shippable, we shipped it immediately, and we told the company that had shipped us the goods, that was our partner, that they were in breach of a contract which very, very astute and smart and experienced attorneys drafted for us. Not the attorneys that are currently representing us. But those attorneys drafted an agreement which said very clearly, because we knew that these gentlemen were financing our goods, and we knew that if they didn't ship all of our goods, we wouldn't recoup the profits that we anticipated having made expenditures on marketing and selling. We would need to recoup a disproportionate amount of the return in the event that they defaulted on shipping the products. So that made a lot of sense to me as they explained it, and we put in a provision that said that they couldn't go for outside financing for the purchase of the products, and they couldn't pledge the products to anybody else, because the only thing we had to recoup our lost profits would have been the receipts of the revenues from the goods we were shipping. I hope this is all clear. The bottom line is that they pledged all of the assets, which were in fact the inventory that we had shipped, to a bank in Nevada, and they pledged it with what's called a UCC-1 security agreement. At the time, I didn't know what a UCC-1 security agreement was. I also didn't know what an order to show cause was, which is when the judge calls you up and tells you to be in the court by 11 o'clock, and you're calling your wife to bring down your shoes and suit. Well, what happened was the bank realized we were shipping the goods. We weren't going to pay them because we didn't have any intention of paying anybody, but trying to recoup our losses, which wouldn't have been recouped from the 1.1 that we were shipping anyway. And what ended up happening was the bank took us to court, and over the course of 4 very long months, they proceeded to sue us for all the money that we had recouped, which in fact we had spent trying to stay alive, but in fact they were entitled to, and we ended up spending the next 6 months shipping all of the t-shirts, which we still made domestically and had been making a profit on, for the purpose of paying the bank back the $1.6 million that they demanded and we agreed to pay in settlement for not going to jail for taking their receivables. That was 1997, spring. And at that time, what we noticed was all of our competitors were launching or being bought by very big companies. We had a competitor called PNB, and they were bought by a company called Perry Ellis. And we had a competitor called Eniche, and they were started by a company called Fila. And we had another competitor called Fubu at the time, and they were financed by a company called Samsung and Alliance Group. And so all of our competitors had these big companies that were their partners, and we were trying to figure this out on our own. And we had no experience whatsoever except for what we believed to be the right marketing and selling techniques and the right product design, because my partner Marc turned out to be a wonderful designer, which was lucky considering the fact that he started out just being an airbrush artist and illustrator, but actually knew how to design clothing by the time we were done with this entire experience. And what ended up happening was we found that we probably needed a partner. And I don't know if any of you remember, because a lot of you are younger than I am. Do you know what an 8-track is? 8-track cassette tape? Kind of? Yeah. That's my gap right there. Anyway, there was a show a long time ago, maybe you saw it on reruns at night, late, called The Greatest American Superhero. And that's what I was. Not the same superhero, or probably the same. He was a teacher. He had curly blonde hair, and he found a suit that made him a superhero, but he never got the instruction manual. So whenever he tried to fly, he'd crash into walls. See, he had the suit and he had all the power, but he didn't know how to use it, right? And that was me. See, I had the opportunity, the marketing, the partner, the position, but I didn't know how to make anything. I didn't know how to finance anything. I didn't know how to what my margin should be, so I didn't know if I was spending too much or too little, and I didn't know how to fix any of that. So my partner comes to me with this amazing idea. He says, you know what, Seth? Maybe we need a partner. Well, yeah, that's a good idea. I want to look into that. And all of a sudden we found out the Levi's was interested, and Ralph Lauren was interested, and Nautica was interested, and Perry Ellis was interested, and a bunch of other people. And we had the most amazing experience over 2 years, being told by each of them how wonderful and exciting our company is, and how much they were very interested in buying it, except when they found out that we had $6 million in debt and $15 million in sales, at which point they said, what, are you crazy? And they passed. But what's interesting about the entire process of getting to meet Ralph Lauren, who's shorter than he looks, and all of the other CEOs of all of these businesses, is that they gave us our education. Nautica taught us about planning. Polo taught us about marketing, or more about marketing. Perry Ellis told us about projections. And we assembled the pieces that we didn't have through the process of going through the potential acquisitions that these companies were going to go through with us. And it didn't help us during those 2 years. We were struggling, we were in debt. I'll tell you about those stories in a second before I'm pulled off the stage. But the interesting thing was that we got our education. We found the roadmap. We were told that our margins had to be over 42% maintained, and we learned the difference between maintained margins and initial gross margins because of the dilution in our industry. And we learned what sourcing was about and which countries were great for making which products. And we learned what a planner was. Well, we didn't really learn what a planner was, but we learned we needed a planner. So when I went to hire a planner and she asked me what her job description was, I said, I don't really know, but I know I need you. And she taught me what planning was, and eventually I think I learned how to twist it a little bit differently, because all planners think like planners, and you want to plan differently sometimes. But at the end of the day, we learned the business through the process of putting ourselves up for sale. And the most amazing part about the process was that during that time frame, we were treading water. We couldn't swim. Swimming would be what you do when you're unencumbered. Treading water is what you do when you have like shackles to your feet. 26 years old, $6 million in debt, 2 kids, living in a rent-stabilized apartment with your wife at $700 a month, coming home every night with your wife saying, how you doing, how was your day, and realizing you can't say to her, it sucked. I got to the office at 5, I sat in my car till 5:30, mustering up the courage to open up the door and realize what kind of shit lay ahead. And all of our money's in this company, all of our credit cards are way overtaxed trying to keep this thing alive, and we're about to go into the crapper, and we're going to live in my mom's basement. You know, that really doesn't make for good table talk, so you try not to share too much, and you keep it in, but sharing helps, and keeping it in doesn't, and it's a lonely road to walk when you don't want to tell your partners how doomed they are because they need to come back in and design every day, and well, that was our situation. So by the end of 1999, I had developed a number of things which you guys might find very effective for cash flow purposes. What I found was that if you take, what happened was in 1997 or 8, some of you that might be in banking know that there was a lot of federal regulations that were imposed upon banks, and banks stopped being as lenient as they were. And so the float that we used to have when we made the deposit into the bank, when we assumed that it would clear, which most of the time it did, from our customers, the checks, and we then wrote checks against it to make payroll and other things that were silly like that, we found that the float wasn't there for us anymore. They wanted our checks to clear before we issued the checks, but they didn't tell us. They just stopped one day. And for the first time ever, the one thing we were religious about was keeping the lights on and making payroll. I figured, I mean, I cashed my checks, which weren't very large to begin with, but, you know, I always knew that if I couldn't pay my people, they wouldn't be around. If they weren't around, that would be the end of the day. We'd have to close the shop. I also knew if there were no lights or power, they probably couldn't work very well. So those were the two things I really religiously kept to, and we'd often make deals with distributors, like calling up a Canadian distributor and saying, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today, $100,000 now, we'll buy you $150,000 of free royalties for the next quarter, or whatever you have to do to stay alive. I remember one instance where I sent an employee of mine to Japan, begging him to get $500,000 as an advance, and he finally did, but I had to go back to a pinky list gentleman in Japan many months later and tell him I couldn't pay him back. So there's a lot of crazy stories, but to help you guys, because I want to be pointed about this conversation, one of the things that I learned is that if you take the check that you receive from the bank, the one that you issue out to your customers or to your vendors, I'm sorry, the people you owe money to, and you look at the bottom, you'll find that the numbers are raised. And if you lick your finger and rub it against those numbers, it actually messes up the magnetism in the check. And you can buy an entire 2 weeks in data processing because the check can't be automatically processed. In addition to that, if you take out an entire number, Vern in Indiana is calling Carol at PNC Bank trying to figure out what the missing digit is. That's good for another week. So, you know, that's 3 for 1 on a scrub. All of our checks in 97 and 98 had bad numbers on them. The other thing that I learned is that if you get your American Express bill, which has, if you pay your bills on time, almost unlimited capacity, and if you get you could affect your invoice date, but if you get your invoice, let's say on the 5th day of the month, then if you wait to make all your charges on the 6th day of the month, then the new statement won't come till the following 3rd day of the following month, and won't be due till again the following 4th day of the month. It's all right there, you see. So what happens is you get 60 days from American Express on a revolving line of credit. And, you know, we have 6 million points right now from those days. So that was kind of our experience. It was really bad. And I tried very hard to sell the company, and there were no takers. And I went down to the opportunity to give the company to anybody, all equity, with me as their indentured servant for many years, if they would just take the debt, because at that point most of the debt was friends, family, mothers, uncles, cousins, people we met on the street that had the misfortune of talking to us longer than 5 minutes, credit card companies, and about $2.5 million of people that were silly enough to give us credit. And so the biggest person that owed us the most amount of money was actually a cousin that I met in 1995. I didn't know I had a cousin in Houston, Texas, and I certainly didn't know I had one in the apparel industry. And he had the misfortune of finding me, his cousin, in 95. And in 97, when I got in trouble, he was good enough to help us with lines of credit to open up LCs. Just to give you a quick recap on what happened with the $7 million in orders, because I'm sure you were all going to think about that tonight and wonder what happened, because I didn't know how to make any goods. One vendor called us up from Taiwan and said, you know, guys, the people you're dealing with are not honest. Now, at that point, we already knew it, but we didn't say anything. We said, okay, how's that, right? He said, well, you know, they used to take the numbers that I charged them, and they would inflate the number. And then we realized what was happening. They weren't happy with the 60-40 split. They didn't think it was fair. I mean, they negotiated. They said it was fair. Maybe we didn't check enough times to see if they were really okay with it. But when they said 60-40, they really meant 60 for us. You won't know about it because we're going to either make the goods in a very inexpensive place, which will result in bad quality goods, or make the goods in a regular place and just inflate the cost of the goods. So they were cheating us on what the actual cost of goods sold was, and that was very difficult for us to overcome, obviously, in light of the quality problems. Well, the person that called us up was somebody that made PVC jackets. Now, if you know production, you know that generally people that make things make one thing. So if I make jeans, I make jeans. If I make knits, I make knits. If I make woven shirts, which are these, I make woven shirts. And if I make PVC jackets, which this gentleman made, then I represent probably about 0.5% of what the entire industry needs of anything. So he was our smallest resource at 0.5% of our goods, and he only made PVC jackets. Well, he was the only honest person that we've ever met from Asia, So we gave him $7 million worth of orders. We said, here, can you make jeans, woven shirts, knits, and PVC jackets? And he did. He actually made them all. We made 26 points on our best product and 6 points on our worst. It wasn't enough to keep the lights on. We certainly lost money on everything we off-priced. But at the end of the day, he made all the goods, kept us alive. Our trade show booth got bigger, and people bought more goods. And so we stayed alive long enough to realize that we were in debt, and what we ended up doing to resolve a lot of things was we tried to sell the company. I've told you all that. Let me tell you one quick roll of other stories. Not having any money was the best thing that ever happened to us, because not having any money meant that anything that anybody else could afford, we couldn't. If they could afford advertising, we couldn't afford it, right? So what did we do? We made 2 million stickers and put them up on every telephone pole in every major city all over the country. I mean, we still had the occasional $563,000 fine for Miami Beach, but for the most part, you know, we executed millions and millions of dollars worth of marketing with stickers. We also realized one show that we couldn't go back to the trade show because our booth had gotten so big, it was half the size of Polo's, and we had no products to ship. And the strategy was good up until a point. At some point, you got to stop, and I didn't realize. And I realized at some point we couldn't go back to the trade show. So what we did was we created a campaign called Where's Ecko? And our story was that we basically didn't need to go to the trade show because we sold all of our goods before we got there. And we had all those people that hand out flyers in Las Vegas with T-shirts that said, Where's Ecko? And we went to the strip clubs and got strippers who looked like they might not know answers to questions and had them hand out flyers that said, Where's Ecko? And people would ask, Where's Ecko? And they'd say, I don't know. And we put signs up that said, Where's Ecko? And so we did many, many things throughout our company's history, trying to compete on ideas and not on dollars. I say it's always a concept over cash. So if you work on the concept that you can't afford what somebody else can, you'll always do a better job than they will with the same or less resources. There's a lot more stuff I could tell you. We worked very hard on coming up with the holy shit, they did it again factor. If somebody would ever see anything we did and they said, holy shit, they did it again, then we knew we did our job. So when we looked at taking out an advertisement in the Super Bowl and we found out that it was $2 million, and then we called in Spike Lee and asked him what it would cost to do a commercial where we had rhinos running down Madison Avenue, and all the fashion houses would start to crumble under the weight of the rhinos, and you would realize that it's the dawn of a new day, we're the new fashion house, and we're going to take out an advertisement in the Super Bowl and show everyone. And Spike Lee looked at us and goes, millions and millions and millions, and we realized we couldn't afford it. And what we decided to do was find another way to capture 40 million people. What we did, what we found was, as the brand grew, that we needed other people besides the core consumer to know the brand so they could buy watches like this one, which all of you guys will get. And what we did was we found that there was 52 million people that watched the Thanksgiving Day Parade. And a float of the Thanksgiving Day Parade is the cheapest advertisement anybody in the world can buy because it costs $250,000 once and $125,000 for the following 2 consecutive years. And we tried for 3 consecutive years with the most outlandish pitches to get the Thanksgiving Day Parade organizers to give us a float parade, which never ever happened to an apparel company outside of once with Oshkosh for 1 year. So we got the Rhino Mountain and the Thanksgiving Day Parade. We got 52 million impressions for the cost of $250,000 instead of 2 million for the half a minute of time that we would have gotten in the Super Bowl and the millions and millions of dollars that Spike Lee would have charged us for charging rhinos down Madison Avenue. So we realized a long time ago that not having cash was actually an asset. So that's one thing I'll give you. And to wrap up real quick, what ended up happening was we couldn't sell the company. I found a person that was willing to license the company. He would give us $1 million in cash. That would help pay us immediate creditors. He would pay us our licensing revenue over the course of time, and that would help us to pay back the $6 million that we owed to all of our friends and family. The biggest creditor that we had at the time was my cousin, who had the misfortune of meeting me. He, at the time, I owed $3 million to. I explained to him that we'll have to pay him back over time. We made a verbal agreement to make this deal with this licensing company, and they were going to make all of our goods. We would help them market it. We would get paid a royalty. And on Friday, I needed that money to pay payroll for the last time before I had the $1 million to settle some of our 1/6 of our debt. And what ended up happening was I got a call on Tuesday where the gentleman said to me, "We won't be able to make the deal." I don't know if you know what it's like being 26 years old with $6 million in debt and having a wife and 2 kids living in a rent-stabilized apartment with partners that don't know exactly what's going on and all of your credit cards maxed out. But if you did know what it was like, and you did come into the office every single day trying to sell your company, and you finally got someone that would agree to buy it that actually wasn't What might have happened to you if you were that person would be your heart would start to pound very quickly, and your hands would get very clammy, and you would start to sweat, and then you would proceed to pass out on the floor, which is what I did when you heard this bad news. And when my assistant at the time walked in and found me on the floor like a chalk outline, she started to yell, all hell broke loose, people were all crazy, and I realized that I might die. And realizing that I might die was an amazingly enlightening experience. And what I did was, I called up my cousin. I said, I got a problem. I might die, and if I die, you will never get back your $3 million. Now, I remember hearing from somebody once that if you owe a bank $200,000, you're in trouble, but if you owe a bank $200 million, the bank's in trouble. My cousin was my bank, and I called him up, and I said, look, we got two options. I could keep running it until I fold, which won't be very long. By the way, this is the lesson to you guys that, right, that I'm not that good, and there's a lot of luck involved in this whole thing. And we could have all been born an inchworm in Nairobi, and wouldn't have had any opportunity, so we don't deserve anything we get. We're just lucky to have been positioned to be in the right place at the right time, and everything we do on top of that luck is our hard work, but don't ever forget that it comes on something. I was that inchworm with my cousin on the phone. I could have been in Nairobi asking him for another $1.5 million on top of the $3 million to settle my immediate creditors and my debt, and I had the incredible good fortune of having a cousin that said that he would agree. What I said to him was as follows. I said, I will give you any amount of our company that you would like. You could have any equity that you would like for $1.5 million, provided you give me the opportunity upon paying you back the $3 million I owe you, plus the $1.5 million that I will now owe you on top of that, with interest, at a fixed rate buyout. I wasn't sophisticated. I didn't want to deal with a multiple on earnings. I just asked him to tell me how much would it cost me if I paid you back sometime in the next 3 years, the $1.5 million plus the 3 with interest. How much could I give you for us to call it quits and for me to buy back this company that I love very much, but I can't afford to run right now? And I had the most incredibly generous cousin that you could ever imagine. And he said, Seth, if you could pay me back my $3 million, and you could pay me back my $1.5 million, and you could pay me 10% interest, then I will agree to give you the buyback for $1.5 million in year 3, $2 million in year 4, and $2.5 million in year 5. And that was the standing agreement that we had. What ended up happening was he gave us $1.5 million in January of 1999. I'll benchmark that time period for only one purpose real quick. At that time, I also heard about an organization in the Ukraine that was struggling. It was an orphanage, and I couldn't afford to do anything about it, but I had heard wonderful things about it. And it's called Tikva. It's in Odessa, Ukraine. And at that time, I went to my partners. I said, look, we got the deal of the lifetime for my cousin. Let's make the deal of our lifetime with God. And if we have the opportunity to, in fact, pay back this debt and one day win back our company, let's commit that the first $100,000 of profit will go to this charity. And my partners were incredibly amazing. They were very generous. They figured, what the hell? We're never going to pay back that $4.5 million anyway. Sure, you could give the $100,000 to the charity. And no, they really are amazing. And what ended up happening was we got the $1.5 million, and for the first time we could stop treading water. We could answer the phones without worrying whether or not it was a customer or somebody that we owed a bill to. We could actually sell. We could develop. And we had that wonderful education that Ralph and everyone had given us. So what we took was that education and the ability to tread water and turn that into swimming. And what we did was we took the $1.5 million, paid down the most immediate of all of our debts. We focused a lot. And between January of 1999 and December of 31st of 1999, we went from $15 million in sales to $36 million in sales. From January of 2000 to June of 2000, we did another, 2000, we did another $36 million in sales, and we had bookings for $60 million for the next 6 months. And I said, wow, we got $60 million of bookings, and we've been profitable, and we looked at the books, and we found out that we had paid back my cousin. We had paid back the 10%. It was June. All we needed was $1.5 million to buy back this company with a book of $60 million in sales. So we went to a license who wanted to license our women's division, and we got a $1.5 million advance, which we gave to my cousin. The corporate holding company at the time had another $1.5 million, in it, which was some of that was our profit. My cousin ended up taking 70% of the business. We had 30%. He gave us back our 70% for the $1.5 million. We left him the $1.5 million. We've also since then made commitments to pay them additional $5 million for thank you money that wasn't part of the original agreement. We've also gone back to some other original donors, and we've been able to give them commitments for additional compensation of another $2.5 million that wasn't part of the original agreement. We then went on to ship $96 million in 2000, and from there it got a lot bigger and better. And so our story is one of perseverance, it's one of education, it's one of entrepreneurship, and it's certainly one of a great deal of luck. In October of 2000, I had the good fortune of going to the Odessa, Ukraine. We've since taken over with other people the opportunity to run that organization, and we've built it to well over double its size from the time that we had it, and we've been able to do a tremendous job for those children. We have other corporate citizenship programs like Sweat Equity Enterprises, which educates young underprivileged children with the opportunities to learn how to design, develop, and process business opportunities. I'm going to take questions and answers today. The company is diversified. It includes the following brands: Ecko Unlimited, Zoo York G Unit, Averex, and Complex Magazine, and we have a partnership with Atari to make video games. And all of that has really come from the fact that we've identified this market, which we call convergence marketing, which is somewhat different than what everyone else had previously identified, which was believing that people were one-dimensional, believing that people only like to engage in one sport. So if they were one, they believed that everyone liked to play basketball, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And if they were a skate company, they believed everyone skated all the time. And what we believed was that people are people. They do many things. They have many interests. They surf the internet, and they watch many TV programs. And if I could just challenge you, when you try to develop your business plan, start with people and think about the fact that those people are real. They have real goals, real desires, real ambitions, real concerns, real interests, real needs. And if you start by focusing on addressing those needs without addressing your own, you'll find that you could back in from them to your retailer or your distribution channel and back into your own needs. But if you don't start with their needs and you only answer your own initially, you'll find that you're not going to go very far or run very long. Anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I'm happy to take any questions. That's my story. Thank you.